Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. We are starting our reading session today with Neema Nawab, poet, writer, and social activist from Saudi Arabia. We call this session Usra, which means that it's quite a family, very close event. So please feel free to ask your questions, to ask whatever you want. And in the process, if you get any new questions, so I encourage you to support the discussion. We decided to start this session straight with the question and answers. And after, I think we'll have opportunity to develop the ideas. So maybe somebody would like to start to ask Neema about poetry or women in Islam, women in Saudi Arabia, the questions which have been in your mind. So I give you the word.
Okay, can I go first?
Oh, please introduce yourself, your name.
Yeah, my name is Farah, and I'm from KL actually. So let's cut the introduction short. So let's go to the question straight. People are told that maybe it's just perception that hijab is actually Muslim women have been brainwashed to wear hijab, or it's just a cultural, that's why you wear hijab. But what about women, Muslim women who choose to wear hijab? Is this their choice? So it's not being oppressed, brainwashed, or whatever. It is their choice. So it is like, standing for yourself that I want to do it. But then at the same time, they have resistance from other people saying that no, you're being oppressed, you're being brainwashed, and that's why you do it. So how do you see? How do Muslim women deal with it? That's my question.
Excellent question. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursalin Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Now, with regards to what we call in English the veil, and in Arabic the hijab, there's also the niqab, and different levels of covering, basically, which have evolved through time. It's very interesting. For example, I grew up in a family where, I'm going to go personal a bit in terms of how, as an example, as a story, basically, is I grew up in a family where my mom, I'm very dark, I'm the darkest in my family. My mom is quite fair, and she grew up in Mecca, from Mecca. So even her time, she used to not cover her face that much. And then when she came to Malaysia here for a few years, she wore her tarha, what we call tarha, the cover, like this. This is called a tarha in Arabic, in this way, basically a little bit of hair showing. So I grew up, and when I was 17, I started wearing the tarha. Now, from a personal experience, I always thought that, okay, hijab is mandated. It is mandated, it's ordained. So, but I would never judge someone who doesn't wear it, because this is very much a personal choice. So the idea of personal choice in the hijab is very much an essential part and factor in the hijab for women. You cannot force a woman to wear the hijab, because it has to be her niyyah, her intention to do it. And why does she do it? That's another thing. For what reason she's doing it. Sometimes women will wear it for cultural reasons, and some will wear it for Islamic reasons. So each woman, as much as she's an individual, is going to be individual, her own choice of the hijab. Now, a few years ago, in the 70s, late 70s, in Saudi Arabia, for example, we had the attack on the Mecca mosque, the Holy Mosque. And after that, we had a very strong Islamic movement that was a resurgence in a way. And we had the Commission for Maintaining of Virtue come out very quick, very fast. And we had the niqab started in Saudi Arabia, where you have the eyes, the face is covered. And this is completely something new, because this was culturally there, but going back into history, I'm a writer and a researcher as well as a poet. Going back into history, how did the niqab start in Saudi Arabia? It's very interesting. So you have the hijab, you have the niqab, and you have different types. So with the niqab, it's very interesting because it was not really a Saudi, culturally a Saudi tradition. We got it from the Turkish rulers, from the Ottoman Empire. We had something called al-Guna at-Turki in Mecca, for example, and it was very elaborate. It was beautiful. It was white and pink, and it had pearls and beautiful gold, and it was with a slit, and it was high. It was just a beautiful attire, you know, and you'd see the slit for the eyes. And it became bit by bit more simple, and it was the black. After a while, it turned to black because black withstood the dust in the desert and so forth. But in the beginning, it was something that we picked up from the Turks, and the Turks left, and we were being, it was entrenched. It started getting entrenched in the society. So that's the story of the niqab in short in Saudi Arabia. And the Bedouin women, of course, used to wear it, and different types as well that you see in Qatar, for example, other countries. So that's the niqab. So for me, growing up in a family where my mother never covered, that's why I mentioned her earlier, it was very interesting. For me as a writer and observer, I thought, how is it that these women are covering their faces? How is it affecting their identity, their perception of themselves? And how is the society perceiving them? So I wrote a poem about it, and if you'd like, I'll share it. And it's about both different types, basically. So for me, it was a foreign concept to cover the face, because in our family, we mix and our faces show. So I thought, okay, with poetry, that's what we do. We imagine something that we haven't been through. So I haven't done the niqab myself in that sense. I didn't grow up in that family where the niqab is enforced. So I tried to imagine, what is it like for someone who wears a niqab? And what is it like for the hijabis, what we call them nowadays in English, hijabis? And so this poem came through. And I'm going to have to stand up, because when I read, I have to stand up. So excuse me a second. Bismillah. The hidden layers. Some think I am in hiding underneath my long black cloak, with little narrow slits for my eyes, cloaked in mystery, medieval modesty, wondering what is going on behind the mask. Comfortable with their own tunnel vision, construing their own scenarios, little knowing that I am proud of my identity, proud of my femininity, proud of my spirit, my faith, my mind, not just my body, proud of my heritage, culture, long entrenched traditions, but modest in my dress, modest in my demeanor, modest in my expectations, viewing the world with sharp eyes, viewing all with curiosity and a thirst to learn. Does my cloak, my masked visage, long viewed by outsiders, with pity, barricade me from the world? Or does it open up vistas of wonder, open up doors for exploration into the unseen, open up the world through a different, hidden, sharp lens? My world is my oyster, as it is for my unveiled sisters. Their choices are made, as are mine. They remain cloaked, I remain uncloaked, all united by unbreakable bonds of sisterhood. So basically, this is a poem that I'm not going to explain the poem, because art doesn't need to be explained. Everybody interprets it in different ways. So, yes.
That pretty much explains it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just following up from
Could you
that.
please introduce yourself?
Sorry, my name is Marjorie.
Marjorie.
Irish dietary manager. I was wondering, the niqab, is that not originated because of the sand of the desert? Was men wear it as well? Or men wear it as well?
Yes, the men wear it, and they call it litham. and the women wear it, and they call it the niqab. Now, the ifam was introduced into desert environment. You see it in Africa, you see it in Saudi Arabia, for example, because of the sand. But to do it and call it Islamic, that's something else. Now, what's happening now recently in the last, since, as I mentioned, since the late 70s, where it started spreading and women started wearing gloves and all that together as a way of what we call conventional or Islam, then that's putting another connotation on it, because it started off as a cultural thing and now it's being perceived in a different way. And now some women will, and men actually say that it's mandated. And there's a lot about that in terms of when you read it in the Quran, in terms of mandating. The cover of the face is a big issue for many of us, because your Hajj is not accepted if your face is covered. Your prayer is with your face uncovered. The awra, as we call it, or of the women, is quite known. It's the hands and the face. So there's a big contention among the ulama, and of course among the major four jurisprudence and the fiqh ulama, madhahib, you know, in terms of the niqab as Islamic, as they call it Islamic. Yeah. And it's spread, now it's spread in different countries also, so, yeah. Any other questions? Maimuna?
Yeah, sorry, my name is Maimuna. Welcome, Sister Eda, to Kuala Lumpur. I just wanted to know, firstly, what inspired you to write poems, being a female Muslim? I have strings of questions, but I'll just start with that.
Okay, what inspired me to write poetry is a long story. I started off as a writer and a photographer. I really never thought I'd be a poet, and I never sought out to be a poet. It just came, subhanAllah. And when I researched that also, not just lately, but also previously, that happens with quite a few poets, like Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. That happened to him, and he mentioned that, you know, his perplexion about, he's very perplexed about becoming a poet. You know, he was a sheikh and then he became a poet. The same Ibn Arabi's work, for example, lots of shuyukh or scholars who became poets. So I'm not saying I'm a sheikh, I know, astaghfirullah, but with poetry kind of arrives. The state of poems and the state of creativity is also another arrival, in a sense, in the sense that you're inspired. And I think of poems and poets as, a poet is to me a vessel, an empty vessel that's being filled with what we call in Arabic ilham. In English we call it inspiration. And so the poems are, most of my poems are not about myself. I don't like to write about myself. I always like to write about the society, about things I haven't been through. So I've written about a variety of subjects, about wars, about child slavery, lately about Sayyidina Bilal, for example, and quite a few different themes. The first book was a bestseller, alhamdulillah, globally. It's, as I mentioned, these poems are all written originally in English. They're not translated from Arabic to English, and they come to me in English. The ideas, the words, the sound of the words. And I just love poetry. It just comes, and when it comes, you just invite it in, because if you close that door, it's gone. So if a poem comes and arrives, then you listen to that voice, that inner voice, and you write it down. But that doesn't negate the fact that you work a lot. Like I edit my poems a lot, sometimes 50 times. So I work a lot on the craft itself. I work on the tools of poetry. I read a lot of poetry from globally, as well as poems in translation by other national writers from different countries, such as Japan and India. So all of them are translated into English, of course. Neruda. Through the years, I've read a lot of poems, but I don't get affected in terms of, I don't like to take up somebody's style and adopt it. I have my own style as well in writing as well as in performing the pieces. So it's a very welcome visitor, and it's very unexpected to become a poet. It's still a bit, okay, the poet, you know, it's funny. It's funny how it evolves, basically. But you can do a lot, because it involves a lot of symbolism. It's another form of art. I'm into photography as well as writing, so to me it's another form of art that really doesn't need much interpretation. And I love to build the poems on layers and layers of meaning. So I work a lot on that as well. And the last book is poems, mystic poems, the latest book, Canvas of the Soul.
Do you share your poems with, you live in Mecca, you were saying, do you share your poems with the Muslim women there? I mean, because you write in English, so how do you do that bridging there, or do you create that awareness of the layering of issues that you try to bring in?
Yes, I am originally from Mecca. All the family lives there in Mecca, Jeddah, Medina, and so forth. But I live in the East Coast right now, Saudi Arabia. But regardless, my poems, as you said, are in English, and some of them have been translated into Arabic from the English and into other languages, based on requests that I get and based on what I think is translatable. Because I started off as a translation specialist, then a writer, so I understand what, and you lose a lot when you translate a poem. You lose the beautiful sounds, the rhythm, and all that. So I'm very reluctant to translate some of the pieces, but some need to be translated because they're requests, not just because of the request, but they need to be translated basically because of what's there in that sense, the message and so forth. So we'll do that. And quite a few women now in Saudi Arabia do read English. For example, the younger generation is more and more into English, so they'll understand the work. Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, so you were saying that the second book is a mystic poem, and I would assume, I have never read the first book, I'm sorry, but I would assume that, as you said, it was about the society. So what triggers that you to finally write something mystic? Is it because of Rumi? Because of you are living in an Islamic country? Is it, what are the specific reasons?
What triggered the mystic poems was very interesting in the sense that they came more than the first book. With the first book, I started, first of all, I didn't start off thinking of writing a book. The first one was a product of a lot of pressure by other poets to share the work. They read some of these poems. They're poets in different countries, and they read the poems. They said, these should be published, they should be shared. And they continued to insist. And a friend of mine through the internet, basically, I'd never met at the time, was in the US. And he's a writer, and he published some of my pieces, and he kept after me. He's like, how many poems do you have? Do you have over 40 poems? Because that's the usual manuscript size, 40 plus for poetry. I said, yeah, I have a few. I had 100 plus. And I was like, so I'm very humble about my work, and I was very shy about it. And he said, no, you need to, how many do you have? I said, yeah, I have over 40. And so when I compiled them, finally, of course, I edited them even more, and I'd already edited a lot, but I edited them in terms of what goes into the book, selected, basically. So that turned out. And this book is, the first book that I'm furling is political poems, poems about women, on cancer, on economy, on different things. It's quite global. Now the other one, in terms of the mystic poetry, was really even more sudden than the first one, in the sense that I wasn't really thinking of writing a book again. But these poems, once I started writing them, because I continued to write poetry through the years, and what I do, I got into this habit of putting the poems in my computer, because I type immediately. I don't write longhand. I don't write my poems longhand, so I type them in. So what happens is, as soon as I finish a poem, sometimes I'll put them all together in a file based on the categories. So I had about 20 or so poems that were mystic. And when I noticed the number, I was thinking, and they all came together. And actually, I wrote a few in Malaysia. My first few were actually when I was visiting the last time, one of my recent visits a few years ago to Malaysia. And I was at a women's conference, and I wrote maybe 5 poems while I was here. And they're all spiritual. So I really didn't notice. See, that's the thing. I didn't really notice their nature. And then when I went home, I continued to write, and they evolved. The poems evolved. And I'd read Maulana Rumi, I'd read Rab al-Adawiyya and Attar and Ibn Farid. But I didn't, as I said, I don't like to imitate anybody. And then when I looked at these poems, I had them all in one folder. And so I had poems on women, I had poems on, so I put them under the title Spiritual Poems. And then I noticed that they were getting to be 30 poems. So I was getting close to a manuscript size, which is 40, as I said earlier. And when I hit 40, I was thinking, okay, now I really have to seriously consider that I am now at a stage of writing in this theme, and it's overcoming me. It's taking over. It's really taking over. And I couldn't even write political poems during those days, even though I do that from time to time. I still write political poems quite often. But the political poems were coming, the women's poems were coming very rarely. It was just one way, and it's like a direction. So I just gave up, and not gave up, but I just accepted it and said, okay, I'll continue to write these poems. I'll see where they'll go. And subhanallah, and then I decided to do a book. The book is very much in terms of, because I'm into arts and I work a lot with artists and I love calligraphy, for example. I wanted to promote Islamic art. Islamic arts through calligraphy, Ibru, which is a marbling of paper, which they do in Turkey a lot. They draw on water, and then they put the paper, and it's called marbling. And also Turkish miniatures. So the book has quite a few, as you'll notice. There's a journey in this book, and this is one thing I've done and worked on heavily in terms of the colors and the themes. And actually I had a list of calligraphic elements that I wanted to have in the book, so you'll notice them as you go through. So it's really to promote Islamic arts. And it's been, for example, this poem has the word al-adil, for God, al-adil, which means justice, the just. So here's the word al-adil, not adil, but adil, and here you have the word al-adil. So there are others. I wanted to put in Muhammad al-Fatih of Turkey, so he's included twice in the book. There are also some poems where I dreamt of certain things that go with these poems, not while I was writing them, but afterwards. So when I was working on the layout, this is one of them, for example. This is a poem about the Quran, and it's called The Living Landscape of Our Souls, or Living Landscape of Souls. And the double huwa, what I call double huwa. So you'll notice quite a few elements. So it's really promoting the Islamic arts, not just, so it's art plus spiritual poetry together. And it's been reviewed by Muhammad Zakaria, the calligrapher, and several artists and scholars from around the world, including Sami Yusuf, the musician, Sayyid Hussein Nasr, the scholar, James Morris, who's an Ibn Arabi expert, and so forth. So quite a few of them. Some of them I know, some of them I don't know. I wrote to them an email and I said, would you be able to review this book? And I sent them samples of work. And of course they can read the whole book if they want. So it was an experience, but yeah, it was an experience. Each book is like a baby. You're giving birth again. And when it's out and it's there and it's no longer yours. And that's one of the other things with poetry. Once you let the poem out, it's written on paper and you share it, it doesn't belong to you. It's for everybody. And they can make of it what they want. Yeah.
I was curious how much the art in Saudi Arabia is used to promote some women's rights and some human rights issues. Maybe in the form, maybe you know about some actions, some with the art shade.
Yeah. Yes, with photography, with artwork, with written work. I think a lot gets said and stated through that because of the symbolic nature of art. You can put a lot of connotations and meanings. So recently we've had an upsurge in the art scene generally in Saudi Arabia. Photography, for example, if we focus on photography, because of digital photography, a lot of young girls and older ladies as well have entered that field now and be encouraged to do it themselves, and they're excited about it. So I was one of the early photographers. I was taking photos at a time when it was really difficult to take photos in Saudi Arabia. And I used to use film, and I love working with film. You know, I still have my old camera and all the lenses. So I take pictures of women, for example, but I wouldn't show their faces. So I'd take them from angles that were very interesting, like a side shot, you wouldn't see the face. I'd focus on the hands or the legs, the feet, not the legs, and take them from different perspectives and show them from their backs. So you'd see a scene of women walking in old Jeddah, in the old Jeddah, old Mecca, or Mecca in the old days, and you'd see this woman walking, and you'd see just the back or a silhouette. And I use that technique quite often, just on my own. And there was another photographer also, she's quite well known, her name is Madiha Al-Ajroush, and she was actually the first photographer that we had in Saudi Arabia. And she did that quite often as well. And she did a beautiful book about the women in the southwest of Saudi Arabia. So we do consider art as a form of activism in a sense, but we also love it for the sake of it, for the sake of art. And it's a joy to come up with different compositions and different ways of showcasing what you want to say in terms of your message through your art. Whether it's,
And the photos, for example, they are published in the internet, or you have exhibitions?
Oh, for my photos, yes. I've had, for example, recently I had a solo photo exhibit, and I called it Through Meccan Eyes. I had it at the Turkish embassy in Riyadh, in our capital. I don't have a copy of the booklet with me right now, but there are pictures and photos from Mecca and Medina, as well as other countries, including one from Malaysia, actually. So we have about 30 photos at the exhibit. And some of them I made were quite large. I had one that was a huge collage of whirling dervishes in Turkey. That was part of the exhibit, and it's in the booklet. So it's several shots of a whirling dervish throughout the different stages of his whirl, basically. So, yeah. But it's a lot of fun to work with photography, especially if I don't Photoshop my work, by the way, that much. I might crop one or two images, but I don't play around with the colors and change the shades.
So all the one that you released for the exhibitions, they are still using the film?
No, the ones I have, and at that exhibit, I had film and digital together, both.
So you have old and recent works?
A little bit, yes. Yeah.
If you can share, you were saying that you were the very few people who took up photography. Can you share your challenges as a Muslim woman? The kind of challenges that you went through when you were first taking up photography in that context, and whether has that evolved, and how has that evolved?
Well, it was early on. This was in the 80s and early 90s, probably. Early 90s, after the Gulf War. I started off, my first camera was a gift from my dad. I was about 9 or 8 years old, and he was into photography. So I used to hold up, for example, the white paper he'd use as, for lighting, and help him with his lenses. Whenever he traveled, he'd carry 2 bags of very heavy lenses, these leather cases that we don't use anymore. But so for me, it just kind of came naturally, in terms of this is part of my life, photography as well as writing. And the challenge was really taking pictures outside the house, because it was a big no-no at the time. Now it's allowed, but you have to always ask permission of women, for example, if you're going to take pictures, even men. Anybody, it's better to ask permission in Saudi Arabia if you want to take a picture. So I'd go to other countries, for example, and ask them, in the Gulf, and I'd say, can I take a picture? And they say, why are you asking? Because I got used to it. That's it.
Can you sort of walk us through the themes? I mean, you were saying that your poems are about women, besides politics. But what are some of the issues in your poem, and if you can actually read one of your poems that speaks about women's empowerment?
Okay. The themes are varied. The themes are quite varied. So what I'll do is I'll read you a poem that's not been published yet, and we'll do that just a second. Okay. This one's entitled, We Are Called Exotic. We are called exotic, our lives falling in folds, the depth complexities, disregarded, dismissed, disrespected, as our fascinating thin veneer is what beckons, beguiles. A bug under the microscope, analyzed, studied, dissected. What makes us tick? What mold can we be fitted into? Do they want to empathize? Or do they ooh and ah and mutter about injustices, inequality, imprisonment beneath the cloistered existence? Will they ever want to know the reality of the rhythm of our lives, our values, relations, closeness, our love for the simple, of nature, of children, of one another, of purity, purpose, peace? Will they continue trying to uproot us in the name of civilization, of human rights, of women's rights, to shape a new beguiling mold, to turn to questioning everything, till time is the governor, till money is the master, till the I is paramount, till none is satisfied, and the peace of the pace of life is disrupted forever. So this is a new poem, relatively new, because it's not been published. And as I said, I'm not going to interpret it, it's up to you.
Yeah, please tell us your name.
Oh, sorry, I'm Natasha. I'm so sorry I was late. I was just a little bit lost. I'm Natasha. Thank you so much. I really love that poem, and for me, the content of the poem, it linked very well with what you said before, the ethics of photography and sort of how in Saudi you are very, you're used to asking permission and taking pictures, taking other people's pictures. And I think that's really beautiful in thinking about the ethics of doing this, because the lens can really be used to exoticize the subject in a lot of different ways. You're just kind of thinking about how we understand tourism and how we understand sort of the power play between the global north and global south. Who has the power to take the picture, and who is entitled to look at the other person to capture their image, and who just has to take it. And I'm thinking right now kind of about my own, I guess, experience in with my family going to Kashmir, which is where I'm originally from, and how it was this feeling of disgust when a lot of tourists from the global north would come, and it was just their right to take pictures of us, of my people, of in particular things which are seen as exotic, as disgusting, as vile, of scenes of poverty, scenes of dirt. And so my brother and I, we very consciously decided to take pictures of them doing this.
Yes.
So we would turn the lens back on them, and so we have this whole series. We were just kids, but of pictures of white tourists. And I would love to hear more about I guess how you've thought about this, how if you have your own sort of personal kind of ethics of taking pictures of other people. And I love hearing that, this idea of asking permission, and then how some cultural contexts are used to it and expect it, and others aren't. That's just very interesting.
It takes a lot of discipline, and like I used to take, and I don't do that anymore, I would take pictures from far of people, and yet again it would be of their backs. Since I can't get to them and I can't ask them. For example, I'd see something very interesting, I'd be in the car and I'd take it. But it would be complimentary. I was very careful about not taking uncomplimentary photos. And I love, the photos I take are of nature, of people, of architecture. So it depends on, of course, on the theme itself, but of people and portraits, I love, my favorites are old people. The wrinkles on their face, the story the face tells, basically, is what, and those specifically, I would go up to them and I'd say, may I take your picture? Because then it's a facial shot. Whereas in the back, I wouldn't as much. But nowadays, I'm even more careful about, I'd show them the photo. Is this okay with you? And if you don't, I'll delete it. Because you can do that with the digital photography. And actually, they appreciate that more once they give their permission. And for example, there are some scenes that I took once at a very open space where there were some women, and one of them objected because it was a big group. So she came to me, she talked to me, and I said, okay, that's fine, I can delete it. It's not a big deal. She was trying to make an issue of it. I said, no, it's not a big deal. You have the right. Even though you're very far in the picture, I want to show you the picture. You can see the picture. You could barely see her in the photo, but she just was very upset. So I wanted to, out of respect for her, I said, that's fine. Because I couldn't go to her, and I was actually, at the time I was injured in a wheelchair. So I took it from far away. I just started clicking, and most of the girls didn't mind, but she did. And so, it's like, delete immediately. So I am careful about that. I've traveled in different countries, and in other countries, for example, recently I was in Fez in Morocco. And in Fez, people are more used to people taking pictures of them. And I would say, give them my salams. And, I'd see, for example, donkeys going up a little alley and the man sitting on the donkey. So I'd basically make eye contact with him and show him my camera so he would know what's coming, especially if it's a flash photo, which is jarring on the eyes if it's needed. So, but I am very careful now, even more than before, even though it's more accepted, but still in Saudi Arabia, it's still not very accepted. There's still people, and it's not necessarily women, it's also men. The reason is a lot of them are worried that it will be published, even though they don't know me personally, but they're worried about publications, basically, because they got used to reporters coming through and people from different countries taking the pictures and putting them on the internet. So that's causing another issue now, the availability of photos on the social media. So that's causing another barrier in a way. So I think asking permission will continue to be an issue for us in that sense.
Hi, I'm Rizky.
Yes, Rizky.
I've been about quite a long period in Saudi. You were saying about taking photographs is kind of big issue outside in Saudi. But even if both parties, the one who snapped the picture and the one here consented to that, but it's still an issue. Because I still remember when I'm going to take a photo of my friend, and come a guy, Akhi Haram Taswir.
Yeah.
So it is not more about whether both are consenting, or it's more than just an ethic, but it's something that you have to follow the rules and which has been imposed by the authority. I don't know whether it's religious authority or the state authority. So how do you face that?
I do face it quite a bit. Forms of art in Saudi Arabia quite often are considered by some people haram. Especially if it's depicting a person with what we call a soul, arwah, a person or an animal, anything with a soul. So that's for some a big no-no. But a few years ago, they allowed people to take photos. And there are places that you're not allowed, and where you're not allowed at installations or security places, there are big posters with a camera, a sign that says no, prohibited photography. Now, for example, in Mecca and Medina, people now with the mobiles take a lot of photos and videos. And that was frowned upon a long time ago. Now everybody's holding them and it's okay. Yet when I go in with my large camera, my professional camera, I would get a lot of stares and a lot of comments when I'm in the haram, for example. Because then even the police will come and, do you have permission? Well, the permission's been given a long time ago. We're allowed to take pictures. Yeah, but you're in a sacred place. So it really depends where you are at. and who comes, and who anybody just can volunteer and say, no, you're not allowed. Who are you to, who is this person who's telling us? It can be anybody off the street. Say, no, it's not allowed. Or as you said, it's haram. So everybody has this feeling that they're allowed to say that, don't take that picture. They have the right to say, even though we're not taking their own picture, we're taking something else, So that happens in Medina, for example. It happens in Mecca sometimes. What is funny is the contradiction, because everybody's going around with their mobile phones taking pictures and videos, yet with a bigger camera, everybody's on your case in a way. But there's a law that gives you the right to do that even in Mecca now, where you can take pictures,
Right.
yes. Yeah.
I mean, at present, you mean at present it's a bit lenient?
Yeah, they announce it in the papers. Now, whether it's enforced or not is something else. They announce in the papers that to encourage tourism, to encourage this and that, it's allowed. So long as you're not bothering people. You're taking a picture of something, not a person, then it should be okay. But personally, I find it very hard to take pictures sometimes in Medina, for example, because just the place itself, just being there, is overwhelming. And I feel like it's disrupting my khushu' sometimes. So I have my camera on the side, or I don't take it with me to the mosque. And if I go out to take photos, I'll do it, for example, for a few hours and take my camera back to the hotel, because I really want to concentrate on my ibadah. So it is very, very distracting. Subhanallah. Sometimes I feel like it shouldn't happen. Like I get this really strong feeling I'm not supposed to take a picture at this time. It's kind of strange. It's a balance, as is life.
Since we're speaking about taking pictures in Haram and Medina, I mean the context of ethics. I'm just wondering, like the kind of destructions that you're seeing now in Mecca, in Haram in itself.
Yeah.
Without that photography, when I was last 2 years ago, compared to 15, 20 years before that, I've never felt wanting to take pictures because you're there for ibadah and things were very, very much different.
Yeah.
But this time around, you feel compelled to because of the state of shock that you're seeing the destruction, the whole new capitalism serving, and the dynamics is changing. So I'm just wondering your personal experience when you go back to Mecca. I mean, like
Actually, with the demolitions, I actually concentrated on taking pictures of the cranes because they were so offensive. And it's a killer when you go nowadays to watch what's happening, the demolitions, both in Mecca and Medina. And Medina is going to have its turn now. It's been announced that there'll be an expansion in Medina. There's going to be a huge loss in terms of the spaces around the northern and eastern side of the Haram in Medina. So we're losing a lot that way, in that sense. So I'm actually taking pictures of the cranes, and because this is a kind of documentation. That's what I do with my photography also, is documenting. So documenting change in that sense. And it's tough. It's really tough.
I was just curious, Natasha just mentioned global north and global south. People, if to simplify, people from global north, if to generalize it, well, it's quite false generalization, but still they come and they blame Muslims and Muslim world for deprivation women of their rights and oppressing women with putting hijab on them. Is there a kind of movement in Saudi against this? I mean, women trying to prove that we are not oppressed, or by being active, or by talking about hijab and other issues. Is there any kind of movement?
Movement in terms of they're not being oppressed, you mean?
Yeah, trying to speak out.
Yeah, there is more voicing of concerns and speaking out. The factor of being worried about speaking out has now diminished quite a bit, whereas 10 years ago it was very difficult. Now there's been the antenna, or the bar has been raised in a way, so more and more women are talking about issues. More and more pictures of women are seen in the media, for example. Faces are put on the media, for example. There are women who are for and against change, so that you can see that in the public arena. Those who are for and against are very vocal, and they're getting to be quite well known for the campaigns that they're involved with, whether they're social or legal or that kind of thing. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, just going on to that question.
Short break. Can we have a short break, or is it difficult now? Because I'll tell everything.
If I'm very urgent, yeah, but you're going to finish soon.
Okay, one more question.
Okay, we will take maybe one or two more questions, and we're going to end up the session.
Yeah, just going off of what you just said. So I would be interested in learning more about how women on the ground in Saudi are negotiating their space in their communities as women, and also challenging these very Islamophobic discourses that you're talking about by specifically, I guess, going back to the texts. So how are women and how prominent is it for women to use Islamic sources in advocating for justice and equality? And okay, in the background disclaimer, I'm working with Musawa right now, and this is exactly what we do. So that's interesting.
Yeah, actually, that's the major ground frame or the framework and the basic principle that we go on when we advocate for anything. We go back to the sources. So it's the Quran and the Sunnah and the interpretation of things, interpretation of matters. So regardless of whatever issue it is, then the issues are very wide. I won't mention all of them right now, but we always go back to the source, and we mention stories, for example, from the Sunnah. Stories are related to Sittana Khadija, Sittana Aisha, and those kind of things. And it's very entrenched in the society to cite that. That's actually a big part of the advocacy, is to cite the Islamic sources. Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
One last one about the why did you then say Prophet Muhammad it's a feminist? Was that your statement, or and then is there a poem that you've written that is a reflection of this?
Okay. Yeah, we think of the Prophet as pro-women, not a feminist, because the word feminism is very modern. So he is very much pro-women, and all of the stories are related to him, and lives with his wives, different wives, are basically women's issues, related to women's issues. So basically, that's what we cite. That's what we always bring up, is whenever there's a contention about something, say, okay, the Prophet ﷺ did this with his wife. He raced her, Sittana Aisha, he raced with her in the streets. He carried her on his shoulders to watch some people come and play with the drums, or the duff actually. So all of these very intimate stories about how he interacted with his own family are cited over and over. His gentleness with women, and in the farewell sermon, Khutbat al-Wada, his famous tawsiyah, as we say, was about women, how to treat women gently, basically. So those are issues that are brought up over and over again, and they're part of our heritage, they're part of our entrenched knowledge in a sense. We learn about these stories throughout our lives, growing up till we grow older, and then we read more and more. We continue to go back to these stories and use them and cite them. So I don't have a specific poem about the Prophet ﷺ and his wives. I'll have to work on some, actually. Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I think Nema Ismail Nawab for joining us this reading session, and I thank all our guests for your thoughts and questions. Thank you for all who was watching us live, and stay with Liber TV. Thank you.